Welcome to the Roots Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Pitcher. Today's guest we have on is Megan Lautz. She's the dietitian for Fairfax and Fire and Police and the owner of RescueRD. She also recently collaborated with the CPSCA to create a terrific resource and guide for firefighters with Diana Nguyen and Kelsey Bailey, who also work in this space as well. I'm really excited to have her on, first and foremost, because I think this is a new path and opportunity for dietitians to be able to go down, to work with first responders and work in the tactical space as well. And we'll obviously touch on those different topics and go into more depth of that. But Megan, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So first question I start with every single person. Can you tell us who is Megan? What is your roots?
Sure. So I'm a dietitian that specializes in tactical athletes, specifically the police and fire side. I always wanted to kind of help people, I think feel like a lot of dietitians, we get into this field to help. And I initially wanted to work with like as a sports dietitian, but ended up falling into tactical. And I feel like it's just an even better fit because I'm able to help first responders who obviously are like number one in people who help people. I just can't do the blood and the guts. So I feel like this is the next best thing is to just like throw applesauce pouches and drop at them. So it's just a really cool area of dietetics that I am very proud to kind of serve in. Other than that, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much obsessed with first responders, so I don't have much of a life, but other than that, I hang out with my dogs and my husband, and we live in Baltimore.
Yeah, I think that we talked about before we got on was, it's a very unique field. It's a great opportunity, especially not only can you help the first responders, but that's also helping their family, and that's helping a greater
Mhm.
population and more people than just that one individual person. And being able to do that on a grander scale, especially with all the different nutrition issues that we deal with every single day, it definitely helps out a lot. But how did you first get into this? Like, how did you approach working with firefighters, police? Like, how does a dietitian even approach this to be able to have the opportunity to do that?
Sure. Again, I'm like someone who just got really lucky and ended up falling into a position. I was laid off from Northrop Grumman as a corporate wellness dietitian, and my heart was broken because I thought I was going to be there for like 30, 40 years. But it was like a year, and they put me behind a desk selling, biometric screenings, and I was mad.
Oof.
Because I'm a trainer and a dietitian and a trainer. Like putting being behind a desk is just not going to go well. So I ended up falling into a job as it was a wellness manager position at a occupational health clinic, which all fire, police, sheriffs, bus operators, basically, if you need to be cleared fit for duty, like healthy enough to do a job, you might go to an occupational health clinic, and some larger departments have them connected and on site, and others have them either as like a trailer or they, send them out to a state site or something like that. So this was with a larger department, Montgomery County Fire, police, sheriffs, all of them. And I just happened to be a dietitian and a trainer. So they were like, oh, a 2-for-1. So I fell into fire the most. Like I think we just got along the best. I took their fitness test. I did a 24-hour shift and just really tried to obsess over what the job meant because I'm an expert in nutrition and fitness. But if I don't understand what they do, I'm pretty much useless, in my opinion,
I
right?
would,
Because you can't
yeah.
tailor it.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we talked about, you have to know whatever population we're in, you have to know their environment to be
Yeah.
able to relate to them, have conversations, be able to speak their language, and then translate what our language is over to them that makes sense. That's going to hopefully provide benefit to their performance in the field too. If you have that disconnect or you don't have that ability to have that relationship, then they're probably not going to care who you are. They're not going to care what you have to say. And your impact in that space in that time or long term is probably going to be minimal. Thinking about the human and the person first is going to be critical before we do the next steps to actually educate them.
Right, right. Well, and it's kind of, I think we've all heard like people don't know how much you know until they know how much you care. And when you talk about first responder populations, they have a huge guard up when it comes to health professionals because they've been inundated with professionals who just really don't understand what they do and, put the bar so high that they feel like they can't reach it. Um, And when you really kind of spend time with them and ask them the questions, they really start to open up and be more receptive to, the kale and quinoa lady or whatever the food police, whatever you want to call me.
Yeah, you got to take small steps. Like, there's so
Mhm.
much misinformation out there, especially on a lot of our social media sites.
Yep.
And people aren't going to change in like a couple days. Like, they're not going to change over their whole entire lifestyle. And depending on,
Right.
see, I'm sure you work with a very large age group. It's probably like 20s. It could be up to, who knows, 50s, 60s as well. So you have these generations of people and several layers of behaviors and habits that they've been doing, and they just get into that same loop over and over. And like, to be able to redirect them from that loop after doing that for, let's say, 20, 30 years, that's not going to happen overnight. But
No.
can I get them to eat one better snack? Did they
Yep.
never bring fluids with them in their car or on the rig? And now I can have them bring fluids. Were they only getting 4 hours of sleep? Now I'm going to get 5 hours of sleep. We can make those little micro doses and additions to their day, and they start to see benefits from it. They're probably going to come back and ask us more questions. They're going to want more help, and then they're going to get better as time goes along. But with our fast-paced society, sometimes that can be a challenge because everyone wants it to happen in like 2 seconds, and
Sure.
not going to happen.
Sure. And I think eventually, like, a lot of them come to me and they're like, I want to lose 20 pounds for this cruise that's next week. And I'm like, do you understand what job you work? Like, that's not happening. Cause that's the thing. It's like, you're dealing with people who see trauma, and trauma changes your brain and it changes your appetite and changes the food choices you want to see. And I feel like that's the first thing dietitians, trainers, health professionals overlook is this extreme exposure and regular exposure to trauma. Um, and then also the sleep deprivation. So, when you're tired and cranky, like what you're not going to eat a salad after getting up multiple times. So, you kind of
That's
have
not
to
who you
make
first
the
go to.
no, it's not. And like even if you look at the research, it clearly defines that no one makes that choice. And then we have questions for that person if they do. So from the other side of the spectrum, it's just you really kind of have to make smaller changes. And I think they're open to it after they kind of realize that they don't have to make these like black or white changes. And they can see improvements, at least in energy levels. If you get them in their energy levels up, they're going to be more willing to work with you longer term.
Yeah, I agree on the energy. That's probably the first and foremost thing. If you can get someone to feel better mentally and physically, even if it's like
Yep.
a couple percent,
Yep.
and they haven't felt that way in years, it's just like game over. You're in. Whatever
Yeah.
else you need to tell me, hey, do what you need to do because I haven't felt like this and I want to continue to keep feeling this or feel better.
Yep. Yep.
Have you,
Yep.
you mentioned PTSD, dealing with a lot of
Mhm.
stress, sleep deprivation. Do you work with a lot of sports psychology or mental conditioning or mental professionals in collaboration with
Yeah.
this group?
So for Fairfax specifically, I work full time for Fairfax Fire and now Police. So I started with Fire, and that was about 1,400 members, and then they added Police on, which brings my total to about like 3,000 members. So I'm slowly dying, fastly, fastly dying, in terms of scheduling, right? So, in Fairfax, this is unheard of, and I'm going to mention it just because I want departments to hear the bar that we are trying to set. So we
Mm,
have me, the dietitian. We have 3 strength coaches for police and fire. We have an athletic trainer, a physical therapist, and up to, I think we just hired 2 more. So 5 behavioral health providers
that's
on
great.
site. They don't take insurance, like it's just free, and they don't communicate with our OC Health Center. We also have an on-site OC Health Center, and we've had it for like 20 years, which is again relatively unheard of for fire. So, we have a pretty well-stacked department, so I can easily refer. I will say, like, I wish we were this like perfectly in tune team who communicates all the time, but I almost feel like because we have so many members to serve, like we're just kind of running around with chickens with
Yeah.
their heads cut off to really try and
You're just trying to
adequately
serve as
serve.
many people as possible, and like you probably really want
Yeah.
to communicate and translate that over to somebody, but it's like I either help 8 people today or I spend 2, 3 hours and like communicate all the people I already helped. It's like, what is
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
cost
And you're
benefit
talking
ratio?
about all those members for one-on-ones, but then also we have 40 fire stations. I think 40. I might have the numbers fudge. 40 fire stations, 3 shifts. So you're not seeing the same shift every day at that fire station. I think there's like 7 police stations, and then there's
Mhm.
a ton at headquarters. So, it just even if I wanted to go on site to a station, I would have to hit that station 3 days in a row, sort of, not really, but basically hit that station 3 days in a row, and I would catch 3 different groups at 3 different times. So it's a very like, I don't know, I just find it really tricky relative to sport, but I also have never worked in sports, so I can't really tell you.
So then is it both then? Like you're meeting them at the place where they're at, and then you have another, you mentioned a center facility where they can all come at one place, or how does that look?
Yeah, you don't really catch them at one place. Like, they work at their stations. So we have where they work, either at their station or if they're on a day work position at some other facility, in the county. Um, you have our WellFit facility, which is WellFit is the gym where we have the strength coaches and the workouts and blah, blah. And then we have headquarters, which is where we have the OC Health Clinic. So I have an office at the OC Health Clinic. I have an office at WellFit. So I float between those two. I see about 15 to 20 people a week, which is kind of a lot.
Yeah.
And then I try to do like 3 to 5 either presentations, station visits, smoothie demos, wrap demos, like on site somewhere per month. Um, but I'm kind of making this up. Like, there really are no standards, which is hard for a type A dietitian who's like, am I reading the bar? Like,
You have nothing to compare it to. You don't know. It's like, what is our guidelines? It's just, I'm out here helping people. And as
yeah, like
long as we're doing that, like that's what matters. I mean, probably eventually you're gonna want to something kind of like written out in case you hire more dietitians or you help other dietitians spread this out to other parts of the country. But with how
yeah,
many
and
3,000 people, like that's a lot.
it's a lot, and that's the thing. So the one-on-ones is where we see the best behavioral change, right? Or we can at least track it and trend it, right? So, I can maybe see 50 total people in a month, and, it's barely scratching the surface for a 3,000 member department. So we're looking at potentially hiring another dietitian, hopefully in the next year or so. Whether it'll be part-time or full-time, I'm not sure. It's just also challenging from the tactical side, which even if you talk to our H2F or soft dietitians, like, how do we just demonstrate return on investment as clear as athletic training and physical therapy, right? Where they can show significant workers' comp changes.
Yeah, funny you say that. I have a tool that I developed that has like
Oh, perfect.
that you can link basically with data points. So the last two places I was at, worked with an athlete management system, Kitman, and then
Hmm.
also Smartabase. So I was able to in the last place, so basically develop and build out a nutrition hub where I was
Yep.
able to track biomarkers, body composition, this one-on-one assessment that I have there as well. And then we created a lot of graphical, easy to read to apply over to the individuals, or in this case, the athletes we were working with, to be able to have that conversation and communication and actually track objectively and subjectively progress, like
Right.
in their sleep, in their hydration, in their fueling timeline, their overall nutrition knowledge. So hopefully, then when we provide that for every 3 months or biannually, whatever that is, to our coaches, to our athletes, parents, staff, whoever that was, um, I was able to then, in that sense, show the value of what I was providing and giving back.
Yep.
Which the
Yeah.
more we can show value, the more we can show we're a critical part of this team, and like you either need me here or you need more of us here. That
Yep.
locks us into those positions and opens up possible positions into the future
Yep.
where we get a seat at the table and maybe you see strength coaches are heavily now involved in sports science. Well, why can't PT, athletic training, sports nutrition, mental conditioning, leadership and character development, why can't they have a piece of that puzzle or a hand in the table to be able to also play and have that significant change as well?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, and as dietitians, like, not only with the medical nutrition therapy side for police and fire, hydration related injuries are huge. So, trying to demonstrate reducing that is, again, a little bit of a challenge. If you can't get in consistently to the academy and stuff like that, heart disease, cancer, other high risk for police or specifically fire. So, there's definitely a place for dietitians. It's just still trying to figure out, like, how are we going to demonstrate return on investment enough that a department's going to want to invest in a part-time, a full-time position?
It comes down to, is this going to be a revenue opportunity or is it going to save our company money? And if you can show how to
Yep.
reduce injuries and reduce illness and people are getting better and that's leading to an improved performance on the job, however you can strategize and figure that out, like that's kind of like the lock and key. We can
Sure.
definitely make a huge impact if we can kind of standardize and figure that out for nutrition for sure. So
Absolutely.
you mentioned some common pitfalls that first responders might deal with. We talked offline about certain health risks, lifestyle considerations. Could you go over some of those common themes and patterns and trends that you see on a regular basis?
Sure. So we see heart disease is a big one. So 45 to 47, depending on what year range you're looking at, percent of line of duty deaths are related to sudden cardiac events.
Hmm.
So a lot of people who aren't familiar with this population, if they thought about a firefighter who might die on duty, they're probably thinking like collapses, burns, maybe like getting hit by a car, something like that. But the reality is almost 45%, almost half are related to sudden cardiac events. And they're typically due during or around fire suppression calls. So, and firefighters actually, most firefighters who are required to be EMS or paramedics are usually both. They are actually only running 1 to 5% of calls as fire. The rest are all EMS. So the fact that they are dying in those situations is particularly concerning. So we see higher cholesterol levels, high blood pressure, and other cardiac issues with firefighters. We also see a high risk of cancer. IARC actually just classified firefighting as an occupation as a type 1 carcinogen. So it is known to cause cancer in humans. Part of that is due to all the exposures to chemicals. They're trying to do a bigger, better push for decon or cleaning gear immediately after fires, reducing exposure to diesel fumes and those kinds of things. But it's still hard when, you have those firefighters who've been around for 25 years who think the sign of respect or that you're a good firefighter is that you have the soot on your face, your gear is black when it was supposed to be tan. Like it's just a challenge. The newer firefighters are on board. But we see about 2 out of 3 firefighters die of cancer. Um, and when we look at line of duty deaths, so the cancer risk is exponential. Um, and then the other 2 things that we see is mental health. So suicides are pretty high. Um, and then other mental health disorders. So you're seeing a lot of firefighters on certain antidepressants, medications, insomnia medications, which, as we all know, have certain interactions. And if they like alcohol, that can be a challenge. And then the last big thing is overweight and obesity. We do have some data to suggest that BMI is an accurate measure for firefighters. Yes, they are an athletic population. They do have a very high muscle mass, and we see that on the in bodies, but their body fat is also pretty high sometimes. So that they don't like to hear. But we see heart disease, cancer, mental health challenges, and then also overweight and obesity are the big things that we see when it comes to first responder health.
I like you mentioned the chemicals in the environment. I was just recently talking to a tactical dietitian a couple weeks ago, and she was just giving me insight that looking more into functional medicine, possible supplementation, biomarker testing, just because of the things that we don't think of
Yeah.
typically. That, like you said, the soot, or like let's say you have a soldier who's shooting his gun over and over and over, and the
Yep.
fumes and the byproduct that comes off of those bullets doing that for 20 years, and how those chemicals get in your body and cause a variety of those different diseases and issues that you already said. Your everyday person has no clue that like that's actually affected them, right? They just think that like,
Mhm.
it just happened for an hour, like it's not a big deal. But when you accumulate that much over all that time, like it's going to
Yep.
develop to be something down the line. So how do we then put ourselves in a position or help them to mitigate those from coming up is the next big challenge that we have to think of.
Yeah. Well, and you also see, the all of these exposures, they could be one call. Like we had a trash compactor fire years ago in Fairfax, and like I think 5 firefighters have been diagnosed with cancer since.
Hmm.
Um, and part of that is, when your SCBA is like the mask, and this is really bad. They don't call it an oxygen tank, right? But like that's what people understand it as when you're a
Yeah.
civilian. The tank they wear on their back that they breathe out of, right? Self-contained breathing apparatus. Um, you're not, they weren't wearing that. So you can't see a lot of these carcinogens. Like you can't see what you're breathing in. And we see a lot of lung issues, a lot of cancer related stuff. So the other side of this for dietitians is I've worked with people who are get their thyroid removed, and now they have to do ionizing radiation. So that requires a no iodine diet. I don't know if there's a harder diet than a no iodine diet. Other
You
than the
solve everything.
yeah, it's salting in it's literally everything. And then the poor guy, like the person I was working with, had a chyle leak as well, which is an absolutely 0, 0, 0, 0 fat diet. So it was
Oh,
just like, oh my God. But there are these opportunities so I'm not familiar with those types of diets, right? Like I'm a dietitian who specializes in first responders. Like we don't see that many chyle leaks, even in
right.
clinical.
Yeah, it's those one-offs. You're just like, man,
What
I
the
haven't
hell
had,
is this?
I haven't been in clinical for a long period of time, or it's just like I need to go talk to a clinical dietitian or ask some questions because I
Mm-mm.
I don't even know where to start here.
Nope. Yep. That was me. But the thing is especially when you're a dietitian who really understands their job, you're an emotional support system. So I felt like for a lot of those cancer related things where I was working with firefighters, but I didn't really understand the diet, but I could look up the research and understand the logistics of it, and the boxes they needed to check. They had someone to sit there and strategize what they were going to buy from the grocery store. They had someone to talk to about how they're now sitting behind a desk. They're not with their former crew. They're really struggling with certain things. So it's not just about the nutrition piece that you can provide. You can actually reduce a lot of stress and anxieties around certain things during certain periods of a firefighter's career, because the reality is most of them are either going to have cancer, they're going to have a shoulder, back, neck, or knee injury that's going to pull them out of their job. There might be a mental health crisis or a addiction crisis. Like they're probably going to hit one of those throughout their career, and it's going to pull them from their crew, which is really kind of borderline traumatic maybe for them because they're without their team. And we have an opportunity to provide them that support during that period of time, which is really challenging for them from an identity standpoint.
It's just there's so many parallels with athletes as well. So it's like when
Yeah.
you look at both side by side, I mean, it makes a lot of sense that what we do makes a tremendous impact. Sometimes you are, you have behavioral health. Sometimes you are that therapist for them. Like
Yeah. Not very good
you don't
one.
want to give them all the solutions, but sometimes they just need an ear for you to listen to. Some of the
Mhm.
struggles and challenges that they're going through, and they don't always want you to like come up with the answer for them, but like, can you just take 5 minutes and because I'm really struggling today.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm trying to do better with the therapist side of it because I'm not a very good therapist. But just providing that additional support and understanding where they're at, and then knowing the suggestions to make. Because when they're in a light duty assignment and they're in like a day work, I don't know how to say this in civilian terms at this point, like a 9 to 5 schedule where they're used to 24-hour shifts. It's a different lifestyle for them. So they have to understand how to eat around that new lifestyle that doesn't, involve having to leave the state, like leave immediately for a call.
It's irregular. Like
Yeah.
their lifestyle is never going to be a normal, like you said, 9 to 5, 8 to 4 job.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's not nothing they do is really normal at the end of the day because you don't really know what experience you're going to go into. Like, are you going to
Nope.
be in a gun battle one day? Are you going to be in a crazy fire? Like, are you going to have to rescue somebody from a river? Like you literally don't know when you get called onto
Nope.
a scene, like what could essentially occur or happen in that moment.
Sure.
So
Sure.
you're
Sure.
constantly just having to be flexible and figure it out in that time and doing the best you can with the team that you have.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
One question I asked, so with firefighters, them going into obviously very hot places, wearing a lot of equipment, is there anything different you have to do from a strategy standpoint for their hydration or electrolytes or recommendations that you give to them?
Sure. So the big thing with fire is, so when you wear bunker gear or the coats that they're the big heavy coats, the big heavy pants, they're usually a tan color. Some departments have black. Um, Basically that gear has a protective layer. And one of the big concerns with that from a cancer perspective is they're very high in PFAS straight out of factory.
Mm.
So that's been a fun
We're
situation.
just never winning.
They're never winning. And that's why a big thing is if you're a trainer or a dietitian working with fire, we do not recommend working out in gear, like doing deadlifts in gear, doing workouts in gear, crunches in gear. You can use gear if you're throwing ladder and hose and you're doing training, but you want to reduce that exposure as much as possible. Again, because you want to reduce your risk of cancer, right?
Yeah.
So that gear, now the reason it has PFAS is because it helps with the moisture wicking and oil wicking. And it's kind of hard. I sat in on a class about the like how the gear is structured. And from my understanding, from a tactile perspective, or whatever the word is for clothing, um, is you need to protect them from oil, you need to protect them from water, and it's hard to do both at the same time. Um, so in any case, that prevents them from their sweat evaporating, right? So if you can't evaporate sweat, your body keeps dumping sweat out to try and regulate body temperature,
Mhm.
right? So they're losing 40 ounces, 1.2 liters of fluid in 30 minutes of fire suppression related activity. 30
Mhm.
minutes. So based on the CSPDA graphic that they have what's in your sweat, that's about 460 to 1800 ish milligrams of sodium, and then a significant amount of potassium. That's like almost a low sodium diet that people need to eat in a day.
You need to
Mhm.
have drip drop and write stuff a stat
Yeah,
as soon as they
exactly.
come out.
Exactly. So, I do really like drip drop. Right stuff, I just feel like it's a little too salty from a taste standpoint, but that's a
Like the
personal
same.
preference. Yeah. So I just, and full disclaimer, I've done presentations for drip drop, but they don't pay me for anything else other than doing the presentation. Just comparing all of the different types and the ones that tend to taste the best versus the osmolality and all of that. I feel like drip drop's kind of up there. But again, we've had to use liquid IV in Fairfax because when you do a 3-point cost comparison, which is what departments will make you do when you want to buy a product, you have to compare 3 different ones price wise. Liquid IV came in 4 grand cheaper for the same amount of product. So is it the
Yeah,
best?
let's say it's not the best possible thing, but if it tastes good and at least gets us a decent amount of electrolytes that we need,
Yeah,
like, it's just what we're gonna have to do in that situation.
exactly. So and it's free. Other than that, like firefighters tend to be pretty cheap people unless it's caffeine or alcohol or trucks, the year after rookie after becoming a firefighter. So, you know what I mean? Like they don't these products seem pretty expensive to them. But once they try it, uh, especially around a high intensity alarm training drill workout, and they don't feel hungover from that. Because as a civilian, the best we have to compare is like, I don't know if you've ever done yard work in the humidity, like in the middle of July, because
I
that's the
w
only time I do it.
I did lawn service for, like, 2 or 3 summers
Yes.
in a row in, like, 90-degree heat, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, like, the only time my stupid self decides to do yard work is when it's like I could potentially die from it, you know? So that feeling where you just wanna eat pizza and, like, die because you're so dehydrated, like, this is what they're doing, and it's happening in a very much shorter amount of time. So when you have them try the product and they have energy to do things after, especially for recruits who need to go home and study for other tests or other prep for other things, you need their brains to be back to where they need to be, and that hydration piece is super important. We also see a much higher risk of rhabdo in police and fire academies, partially because sometimes the instructors don't always listen and progress training appropriately, even when you have professionals available to tell you what to
I
do.
feel like that's anywhere, like, there's always gonna
Yeah,
be some staff that just they've done this for years, and this is the way I've done
yeah,
it, and they have this closed mindset with the blinders on, it's like,
yep,
"Well, I've been
yep.
only doing this for 6 to 8 years, no big deal, and I've helped X thousands of people, but sure, we'll figure out how to come up to a compromise."
Right, and they only learn when there's a death involved, and it's horrible, but, I mean, we didn't have a death when I was in Montgomery County, but police had 2 cases of rhabdo in the 1st week, middle of September, high humidity. They were having them run in business suits. Like, they wouldn't let them change into PT. You had to wear like,
Come on,
imagine paying all that money for a suit, and then you have to wear it and sweat through it, first of all. Um,
that's a whole
Ended up
other
with 2
topic.
cases. Yeah, I like, my cheap self was like, "What are you thinking?" But, they're like, How could this have possibly happened? We made them only drink water, they're not allowed to have Gatorade, and they can only run in business suits in the middle of humidity in the September in Maryland."
Um,
Like, okay.
It's
So
you think it's logical, but in reality, to some, it's not logical
it's not
until you
logical,
spell it out, or the worst possible case scenario happens, someone
and
gets
there's a death.
sick, ill, or in this case, possibly deceases, and, like, that's when people's eyes open, like, I can't keep doing this because I don't wanna keep resulting in that."
Well, or you get sued, or the instructor gets sued. So, and that's happened multiple times from my understanding in LA County, where Fernando Montes does a lot of stuff with drip drop, and he has all of my hydration flyers are based off of his work where he's done urine specific gravity, and he has a drip drop protocol for how many you give them based on the color of their pee,
Mm.
which is a really good tool. Now, of course, I was like, hey, can we test pee in Fairfax? And they were like, absolutely not. And I was like, cool.
Have you ever heard
Makes
of intake or inflow?
Yeah, and I tried to get again laughed out of the room. Like not even joking. Like I wanted to do inflow. I mean, the challenge is that they didn't have a female model as well. But anytime you talk about pee, they lose their brains because they're immature.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure there's
You
different
know,
levels of maturity there for sure.
it doesn't change when you become a chief. So you know, it Fernando's stuff works really well. I have a free graphic that we stick up. It's on my website, RescueRD.com. So if you work in a fire department or you're working with fire departments, it's already made. Fernando does an amazing job with that. But you know, so with that, after we had those cases of rhabdo when I was with Montgomery County, we implemented a protocol where like I taught both the recruits and the instructors what rhabdo was, how we prevent it, and did that consistently for 4 years, and we had 0 cases. Um, you know, that could be
Proof's
just
in the pudding.
happenstance. Yeah, I mean, or it could be happenstance. We don't know that for sure. I mean, that's anecdotal, right? Like I don't have evidence. But, you know, and then I left 3 cases. I left Montgomery to go to Fairfax, and there's 3 cases. So we have an impact from a hydration related standpoint, especially during the academy piece, where it's usually about a 6-month academy. Um, and then once you get them understanding how those products work, my recommendation is to try and have it provided. Um, you may have to try and write it as departments can't always buy food, right? So you can potentially write it as a medical product because drip drop is technically very close to IV fluids for mild to moderate dehydration. And I have like a little statement that I can send to departments. But that's a workaround. If you can try and make them think of it as a medical thing compared to a food item, they'll be able to buy it. But then they know what it is. They've tried it. They know how it feels. They're more likely to buy it in the field. They're more likely to use it at the right times. For the rest of their career.
Yeah, and a couple of things there. You know, we mentioned multiple different times, you know, the stress, post-traumatic stress, dealing with
Mhm.
situations where they need more electrolytes. Do you also implement any type of supplementation protocols to help with their brain, to help with reducing that physical and mental stress, or maybe their biomarker levels are off, or the environmental factors where you might have to provide them something to maybe can't cure it or it's going to get rid of it, but it could possibly help reduce the impact.
Sure. I mean, honestly, I'm going to be honest. I am not the smartest when it comes to biomarkers, right? Where I personally succeed as a dietitian is the lifestyle modification piece for first responders. I need to call Kelsey Bailey because she's really smart at this and I need her to make me better.
You
But
can also
in any
talk to Jen Gibson or Lisa McDowell. They're also
Perfect. Yes, I'll find them. I will stalk them down. Because, like, you know, honestly, just because I end up overloading my schedule, I just don't have the time to like look into how I can make this better. And that's my own fault of being a bad dietitian. But in any case, you know, I haven't done a whole lot of biomarker related stuff. Um, but I'm sure there's definitely opportunities for that other than the sample. Like we get blood work for like cholesterol and blood glucose and blah, blah, blah. But,
the
you know,
basic.
with recruits, like recruits, you're not getting multiple points of blood work during the academy. You're usually getting it once a year. You know, I haven't done a sweat testing. The problem is again, a 3,000 member department. Like if I had 300 members, I could be at the academy doing sweat testing, but I don't.
Yeah, it's just
3,000.
it's the ratio is just so insane. Like you're
Yeah.
having to literally do those basics. I mean, it was like when I was at IMG Academy. I mean, this is nothing compared to yours, but I was still 350 people to me, 4
Yeah.
football teams and 12 boys soccer teams, and planning all the stuff for all 4 of the football teams for all their travel. So it's like, you know,
No,
I could
you're
offer
not
all
doing
these
it.
other services, but until I receive some type of help where I can do more of those higher level, higher quality services, like we're just going to keep doing this, but you want to keep getting to this. Well, here's the numbers and here's the ratio. Like that's probably just not going to be realistic.
Right, right. And honestly, like they're, you know, they're not going to have sweat testing in the field. Like we just kind of try and throw some drip drop at them and see how they feel. throw some liquid ID, whatever, electrolyte replacement. The biggest education piece though, too, you have to remind them that sugar and sodium are performance enhancing in the right scenarios. And a lot of them are going low sugar, no sugar, because they're being marketed products that are saying they're healthier because they don't have sugar in them. And it's like, you don't understand.
If you're training, if you're in a situation where you have to fight a fire for X amount of hours, like, and you also
Yeah.
don't GI upset, like, well, we're going to have some quick sugars, not only for your muscles, but also for your brain to function. So when you're having a beam falling down you because the fire is breaking loose or whatever else is crazy is happening, like, can you react and be attuned in that moment? Or you're so tired and exhausted that you make a mistake, or now, like, I don't know, I can't do anything because I can barely get through the building because I didn't hydrate and eat beforehand, or I didn't switch out to
Right.
do what I need to do in between and then go back in.
Yeah. Well, and the other side too is that sodium and glucose co-transporter that actually helps rehydrate the cell faster. So
Yep.
you actually see faster rehydration. So I actually have, like, for any dietitians who work in tactical, I have this cute little infographic where I made like a tanker or a fighter jet, or like where it shows the sodium alone and then sodium and glucose. So I can send those to you, but it's just cool for an education point, because I think as soon as you explain it to them, they're like, oh, this makes sense. Now am I condoning that you have sugar and sodium in the day room when you're watching football on Sundays?
Right.
Well, I mean, within moderation, whatever. But
You gotta be
that is a big
realistic.
piece. Yeah. Yeah.
Telling
But
somebody
and
no or don't do it isn't gonna equal a good response.
right. And exactly. I'm all about moderation. It's just there's a lot of specific challenges when it comes to, they want to have these healthier canteens or these healthier units that bring them snacks during these big alarms, but I just think it's a misnomer, because what is performance enhancing during these higher intensity scenarios is potentially not necessarily healthy from a long-term health standpoint when we're going from the day to day.
Yep, you gotta fight your battles where you can. This
Yeah.
was a terrific podcast. Lots of awesome information in here. Definitely getting a really deep insight into what you do on a day in, day out basis and the possibilities that dietitians have to get into this situation or group or opportunity with this population. All of Megan's information, her webpage, her contact information, all that's going to be down in the show notes for you guys to have a conversation like this with her if you want to learn more about this, how you could possibly do it in your area. All of my other podcast episodes, nutrition services, supplement discounts, all that is also in my bio link as well if you want to check that out. Megan, thanks for your time today.
Thank you for having me.